The stars outside the ship window did not move. They never did. They just sat there in the black like cold white eyes watching the GCS Meridian drift through space. The ship was big and old and carried 12 crew members from 7 different species. It smelled like metal and recycled air and something faintly sweet that nobody could ever identify. It had been traveling for 6 months and everyone on board was tired in the way that only deep space could make a person tired. Not just in the body. In the soul, Vethrak stood at his scanner terminal and did not move for a long time. He was tall and thin with green scales that ran from his neck down to the back of his hands. His eyes were amber with vertical pupils that could read a medical scan in the dark. He was the chief medic and xenobiologist of the Meridian, and in his 40 years of service, he had seen things that would make most creatures stop sleeping. He had cataloged venoms that dissolved bone. He had treated burns from acid rain on worlds that had no business existing. He had watched crewmates die from things that had no name yet. But what the scanner was showing him right now made his scales go pale. The planet on the screen was green and blue and violet. It was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are often beautiful. The surface was covered in dense jungle that glowed faintly even from orbit. The atmosphere was breathable. The temperature was warm. And the biological density reading was so high that the scanner had flagged it 3 times with a red warning that pulsed like a heartbeat. Vethrak knew this kind of world. His people had a name for it, Death Garden. He pulled up the crew intercom and kept his voice steady, even though his chest felt tight. The full crew assembled in the briefing room within 10 minutes. Captain Urex sat at the head of the table. He was broad and blue-skinned with 4 arms and the permanent expression of a being who had stopped being surprised by anything a long time ago. Sari sat beside him, clicking her mandibles slowly the way she did when she was nervous. Moken stood near the wall because his species did not sit. And at the far end of the table near the door sat the human Dr. Lena Sarova. She was not remarkable to look at. Medium height. Dark hair pulled back. A small scar on her chin that she had never explained. She was 34 years old and had joined the crew 8 months ago as a xenobiologist. She was the first human any of them had worked with closely, and in the beginning most of the crew had been quietly worried about her. Humans were the new species. The young ones. The small ones. Everyone in the cooperative knew that humans were fragile. They had thin skin and soft bones and almost no biological defenses. They got sick easily. They bruised easily. Most species in the cooperative had laughed a little when humans applied. For deep space research licenses, the cooperative approved it anyway because humans were persistent and nobody wanted to deal with the paperwork of saying no to them twice. Lena was looking at the planet image on the screen with the same expression she always had when she saw something new, like she was already making plans. Vethrak began his briefing. He explained what the planet was. He explained the biological hazard classification. He pulled up records from 200 years ago when a Keth survey team had briefly visited a world of this type. He showed them what happened to the team. He kept the images brief because some of the crew had not eaten yet. He explained the creature known to his people as the Yuk people as the Vrethka. It was roughly the size of a large dog with 6 limbs in the body, covered in overlapping plates of hardened keratin that no standard weapon below military grade could penetrate cleanly. It hunted in short, violent bursts. It was fast. It was territorial. And in the hollow curved fangs at the front of its jaw it carried a venom that the Keth had spent 60 years trying to synthesize an antidote for and had eventually given up. He said the next part slowly so there was no confusion. 1 bite means death. Not probable death. Not likely death. Every species the cooperative had records on. Every single one. The venom attacks the nervous system and the blood at the same time, and the body simply cannot fight both at once. 20 minutes from bite to organ failure. No antidote. No treatment. No exceptions on record. The room was quiet. Captain Yurex looked at the planet image for a long time. Then he looked at Vethrak. Then he looked around the table. Then Lena raised her hand. She said she would go. Nobody spoke for a moment. Sari stopped clicking her mandibles. Moken turned his large flat head slowly toward the human. Captain Yurex blinked all three of his eyes, which he only did when genuinely surprised. Veth. Rax stared at her. She was not joking. Her face was calm and open, and she was already mentally somewhere else the way she got when she was excited about a new environment. She explained that the plant life alone could contain compounds worth a decade of research. She said the risk was manageable if they moved carefully. She said she had worked in high-danger environments before. She said it like she was talking about a slightly difficult hike. Vethrak explained again about the venom. He used smaller words. He looked directly at her. He said the phrase one more time. One bite means death. Lena nodded. She understood. She still wanted to go. The captain approved the mission because the data was genuinely valuable and because when a human said they understood the risk and still wanted to proceed, there was something in their voice that made arguing feel useless. Vethrak went back to his terminal after the meeting and stood there in the quiet and looked at the glowing planet on the screen for a long time. He had a feeling he could not name. Something old and animal that lived below rational thought. He began preparing his emergency medical kit anyway. He packed 3 times the normal supplies. He packed things he had never needed to use. He told himself it was just procedure. He did not sleep that night. The shuttle broke through the clouds, and the planet came up to meet them like a living thing. Through the small viewport, Vethrak watched the jungle grow closer and felt his chest tighten with every meter of descent. From orbit it had looked beautiful. Up close, it was something else entirely. The trees were enormous. Not tall the way trees on calm worlds were tall, but massive in the way of things that had been growing and fighting and surviving for millions of years without anything stopping them. They rose in great dark columns wrapped in vines that pulsed with faint bioluminescent light. The canopy overhead closed like a ceiling the moment the shuttle touched down, and suddenly the sky was gone, and there was only green and violet shadow and the sound of things moving that they could not see. Vethrak stepped out last. The ground was soft. It gave slightly under his boots like it was breathing. The air was warm and thick and carried a smell he had no word for. Something between flowers and rot and electricity before a storm. Every instinct his species had spent 10,000 years developing was firing at once. His scales prickled. His pupils went to their smallest. His body was ready to run before his mind had even finished processing the environment. He looked at Lena. She had her scanner in one hand and was already crouching near a cluster of broad-leaved plants with pale silver undersides. She was humming softly to herself, humming in a death garden, like she was in a park back on whatever quiet green world humans came from. She was not from a quiet green world. He would learn this later, but he did not know it yet. Sari and Moken moved in close formation behind Vethrak. Sari had her environmental suit sealed fully, even though the atmosphere reading was technically safe. Moken carried the sensor array in all 4 of his arms and kept his eyes moving in every direction, with the rapid scanning pattern of a prey species that had never fully forgotten what it had felt like to be hunted. Vethrak kept his medkit in his hands, not on his back. In his hands. Lena moved through the undergrowth without hesitation. She documented everything. She collected samples with quick, practiced movements. She noted color changes in the bioluminescent vines and cross-referenced them against the scanner data with the focused energy of someone doing the thing they were made to do. She was good at this. Vethrak had reviewed her academic record after she joined the crew, and even then he had respected the work, even if he privately thought humans were too reckless for deep field research. He still thought that. Standing in this jungle with his medical kit clutched in both hands, he thought it more than ever. They had been on the surface for 40 minutes when they found the nest dot. It was not obvious at first. It looked like a section of ground slightly raised, covered in the same soft moss as everything else. The scanner had not flagged it because the Vreth-Ka had a unique biological adaptation that suppressed their thermal signature when at rest. An evolutionary trick that made them essentially invisible to standard sensors. Vethrak learned this fact approximately 2 seconds after Lena stepped onto the edge of the nest dot. The juvenile Vreth-Ka came out of the ground the way lightning comes out of the sky. There was no warning, no sound. One moment there was only jungle, and the next there was movement so fast that Vethrak did not actually see it happen. He only saw the result. Lena jerked her left arm back. There was a small sound. Not a scream. Just a short, sharp intake of breath dot, and then she was standing there with a fresh bite mark on her forearm. 2 small curved puncture wounds, already turning dark at the edges the way they did when the venom began working immediately on contact with blood. Sari made a sound that needed no translation in any language. Moken dropped the sensor array. Vethrak was moving before he consciously decided to move. His training took over completely. He crossed the space between them in 3 steps and grabbed her arm and turned it into the light. He already had the scanner running. He already knew what he was going to find, and the knowing of it made something in him go very cold and very still. The venom was there, already spreading. The scanner confirmed it in a flat clinical tone that felt obscene given what it was confirming. Full contact. Active compound. Estimated dispersal rate consistent with prior documented cases. Estimated time to critical organ failure. 19 minutes. He looked up at Lena Dot. She was looking at her arm. Not with panic. Not with the wide-eyed animal terror that every other creature he had ever seen bitten by something lethal showed in those first seconds. She was looking at it the way you look at something mildly unexpected. Curious. A little focused. Like a puzzle that had just become slightly more interesting. She pressed 2 fingers against the bite mark. She sniffed it. Vethrak said her name. He said it in the flat, careful voice he used in medical emergencies. The voice that did not allow for argument. She looked up at him. He told her what the scanner said. He told her she had been envenomated. He told her the timeline. He was already opening the emergency stasis pack because there was no antidote, but stasis could potentially slow the progression enough to get her back to the ship where he could try to support the organs manually, even though the chance of survival was extremely low, but it was not 0, and he was not going to let it go to 0 without a fight. Lena watched him work for a moment. Then she said it, quietly, almost to herself. Like a memory surfacing. She said it reminded her of something. Vethrak stopped. He looked at her. His amber eyes with their thin vertical pupils locked onto her face, and he searched it for signs of the dissociative state that sometimes preceded death in certain species. The calm that was not calm, but shut down. The strange peace that came when the brain stopped being able to process what was happening to the body, but her eyes were clear. Her breathing was normal. Her color was fine. She was still looking at the bite mark. She said the tingling feeling, the one that was starting to move up toward her shoulder. She said it was familiar. The jungle was very loud around them in that moment. Something large moved in the canopy far above. The bioluminescent vines pulsed once slowly like a deep breath. Vethrak stood in the middle of the death garden, holding an emergency stasis pack with both hands, and looked at the human woman who should have been dying and was instead tilting her head to one side, trying to remember where she had felt this before. He had no words. He had never had no words before. He had 40 years of training and a medical database that covered 400 species and 17 categories of environmental toxin, and he had absolutely no words. He began packing up camp. He needed to get her back to the ship. He needed his full equipment. He needed to run every scan he had. She asked if she could take a few more samples on the way back. He said no. She took 2 anyway. The medical bay of the GCS Meridian was the cleanest room on the ship. Everything in it was white and silver, and lit with the kind of flat, even light that left no shadows anywhere. The equipment was arranged with the precision of someone who had spent 40 years making sure that when the worst moment came, everything would be exactly where it needed to be. There were scanner beds and sterile trays and a full toxicology station that could analyze any compound in the known cooperative database within 3 minutes. Vethrak had never once hoped that his medical bay would be enough, and found out it was not. He was finding out right now. Lena sat on the scanner bed in the center of the room with her legs hanging over the edge, eating a ration bar. She had not asked for it. She had taken it from her own pocket and started eating it somewhere between the shuttle bay and the medical bay, because, as she explained, she had skipped lunch. Vethrak had not responded to this because he had been running continuous scans from the moment the shuttle door opened, and he had not stopped running them since, because every result he got back made the next scan more urgent and more impossible. The venom was in her bloodstream. All of it, not a trace amount. Not a partial contact dose. Full envenomation. The scanner was confirming it with the same flat mechanical certainty. It had shown on the planet's surface, and he kept running it again because machines made errors, and this had to be an error. It was not an error. 43 minutes had passed since this bite. She was eating a ration bar. He ran the scan a 7th time. He stood with his back to her for a moment and breathed carefully through his nose, the way he had trained himself to do when something was overloading. His ability to process it in, hold, out. Turned around. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright and present and entirely unbothered. There was a small bruise forming around the bite mark on her forearm. Just a bruise. Not the deep black necrotic spread that the Keth documentation described in every case. Not the hemorrhaging under the skin. Not the shaking that started in the extremities and moved inward. Just a bruise. He pulled a stool to the edge of the scanner bed and sat down in front of her. He put the scanner on the tray beside him. He folded his hands. He told her everything. He spoke slowly and clearly, the way he always did when delivering information that needed to land fully and without misunderstanding. He told her the name of the venom. He told her the mechanism. He explained how it worked in 2 stages. The first stage attacked the peripheral nervous system, causing the tingling, spreading sensation that started at the site of the bite and moved toward the core of the body. The second stage triggered a cascade of hemolytic breakdown in the major organs. He explained that in every documented case in cooperative history, the 2 stages together overwhelmed any known biological defense system within 20 minutes. He explained that there was no antidote because the Keth had tried to create one for 60 years and the venom was simply too complex and too fast. He told her that she should be dead. He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way a scientist states a fact that the evidence demands to be stated. She should be dead, and she was not dead, and he needed her to understand that those 2 things together constituted something he had no framework for. Lena chewed her ration bar thoughtfully. She looked at the bite mark on her arm. She pressed it with one finger. She moved the finger in a small circle. Then her face changed. Not alarmed. Not worried. Something else. The specific expression of a person who has just placed a memory. They were reaching for Dot. She asked him about the tingling sensation. The one that spread upward. She said toward the shoulder right. She asked if it was also a little warm. He stared at her. He said yes. She nodded slowly. She broke off another piece of the ration bar. Dot. She told him about the timber. Rattlesnake. She said it like it was a perfectly normal story. To tell in a medical bay while showing positive readings for a venom that should have killed her 47 minutes ago. She said she had been hiking in a forest region of her home country, a place called Siberia. She said she had been alone because she preferred hiking alone. She said the snake had been under a root she stepped over, and it had struck her on the ankle before she saw it at all. She said the feeling had been exactly the same. That warm, tingling pressure that moved up the limb. A bit of nausea. A headache that lasted a few hours. She said she had finished the trail. Bethrak did not move. She said it was about 18 kilometers total. She said the back half was more interesting anyway because it went up into the higher elevation and the view from the top was worth it. She said she had reported the bite to a medical station when she got back to the nearest town, and they had monitored her for a few hours and then sent her home. The medical bay was completely silent, except for the low hum of the medical bay was completely was completely silent, except for the low hum of this ascended medical bay was completely silent. Ship. Vethrak became aware that his mouth was open. He closed it. He asked her very carefully if she understood what a timber rattlesnake was. What its venom was classified as. She said yes. Hemotoxic. Destroys tissue and affects blood clotting. She said she had looked it up after the bite. She said it was pretty nasty if you did not get treatment. He asked if she had received treatment. She thought about it. She said she had taken some medicine from her bag. Something for pain. She said she had a small kit she carried for hikes. He asked what the medicine was called. She told him it was a mild over-the-counter painkiller available on Earth. The kind of thing his species took for minor muscle soreness. It had no antivenin properties of any kind. Vethrak stood up from his stool very slowly. He walked to the toxicology station. He pulled up the Earth biological database that the cooperative had compiled when humanity first applied for membership. He had never opened it before because he had never needed to. Humans were new. Humans were the small, fragile ones. Everyone knew that. He started reading. The first entry made him stop. The second entry made him sit down without meaning to. By the CO stop. Fifth entry, he had stopped making any sound. All. Lena hopped off the scanner bed. She said she was going to get some water. She said her arm was a little sore and she might put some ice on it. She asked if he needed anything. He did not answer. He was still reading. Vethrak did not sleep. He read through the night cycle and into the next morning, and by the time the ship lights shifted from dim to full, he had filled 14 pages of notes and deleted them all because they felt insufficient and started again. He cross-referenced the Earth biological database with the cooperative hazard classification system 3 times because the first 2 times he assumed he was making an error. He was not making an error. The third result was the same as the first 2. He requested a full crew meeting for the morning. Everyone came. Even Mokin, who still looked slightly unwell from the day before. Captain Nurek sat at the head of the table with his arms folded and his expression careful. Sari sat very still. The others arranged themselves around the table in the quiet, careful way of people who knew something significant was about to happen, but not what shape it would take. Lena sat at the far end. Her arm had a small bandage over the bite mark. She had her hands wrapped around a cup of something warm. She looked rested. She looked fine. She looked like someone who had slept well and was ready for a normal day. Vethrak stood at the display screen and began. He told them that he had spent the night reviewing the biological profile of the human home world. He said he was going to share what he found. He said he wanted everyone to understand that everything he was about to present was sourced directly from the cooperative database and was factually verified. Then, he started showing them. The first creature was called a box jellyfish. Vethrak put up the image and the data beside it. It lived in the oceans of Earth. It was transparent. It was almost invisible in the water. It had no brain. It had no eyes in any meaningful sense. It had tentacles covered in cells that each contained a microscopic needle mechanism, so precise and so fast that it could fire before the nervous system of the target registered contact. The venom it delivered attacked the heart and the nervous system simultaneously. In Vethrak's people, it would cause cardiac arrest in under 2 minutes. There was limited treatment available even on Earth itself. The room was quiet. He said humans swam in those oceans recreationally, for enjoyment. He let that sit for a moment. He moved to the next creature, blue-ringed octopus. Small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. Bright blue rings across its body. The rings were a warning display. They meant the creature was about to release a venom called tetrodotoxin for which there was no antidote anywhere on Earth. No antidote. The only treatment was keeping the victim breathing artificially until the toxin passed through the body naturally over several hours. If you stopped breathing before that, you died. The venom was powerful enough to kill 26 adult humans from a single animal. He said humans found these animals beautiful. He had found documented cases of humans picking them up, holding them voluntarily. SSRE made a sound. She pressed one of her smaller hands over her mouth structure. Vethrak moved to the next entry. He talked about the bullet ant, an insect, very small. It had a sting that human researchers themselves had ranked at the highest level of their own pain measurement scale. The description left in those records by human scientists who had voluntarily allowed themselves to be stung in order to study it included phrases that Vethrak read aloud carefully. He stopped after the third phrase because the expression on Moken's face suggested that further detail was unnecessary. He said human researchers did this on purpose. Science. They wrote it down and published it. He talked about the cone snail, about the inland taipan, about the deathstalker scorpion. Each entry was brief and factual, and each one sat in a room, like a stone being dropped into still water. Then he talked about the honey badger. This was not a venomous creature. This was something different. The honey badger was a small mammal roughly the size of a medium domestic animal. It had loose, thick skin that was extremely difficult to penetrate. It had a low sensitivity to pain that was unusual even by Earth standards. It was documented to have been bitten by venomous snakes multiple times in a single encounter and to have recovered each time by simply lying down briefly and then standing back up and continuing what it was doing. What it was doing was usually attacking something much larger than itself. The honey badger had no natural predators willing to engage it consistently. It attacked beehives for food. It attacked venomous snakes. It attacked things that looked at it the wrong way. Vethrak paused. He said this animal lived on the same planet as humans. He said it was not the most dangerous animal on that planet. He said humans thought it was funny. There was documented cultural material created by humans, in which the honey badger was celebrated for its complete disregard for danger and personal safety. Humans found this relatable. The silence in the room had a different quality. Now, he pulled up the classification data he had generated overnight. He put it on the screen in large clear text. Earth. Galactic Cooperative Hazard Classification. Class 8 Biohazard. One tier above the planet they had just visited. The death garden that had made every alien crew member's biology scream with the need to leave. That planet was a Class 7. Earth was a Class 8. Earth was worse. Earth had been worse this entire time, and no one had thought to check because humans seemed so soft. So new, so small. Captain Urex had not moved. He was staring at the screen with his 3 eyes, and his expression had gone somewhere that Vethrak could not read. Then, Lena spoke. She said the display was a little dramatic. She said most of those animals were not that common. She said you could go your whole life on Earth without encountering most of them. Vethrak turned to look at her. She paused. She seemed to think about this honestly. She said except in Siberia. She said in Siberia there was quite a bit. And in Australia. And in some parts of the ocean. And certain forests. And actually some of the deserts. She said, if you went outside regularly, you would probably encounter something eventually. Moken sat down on the floor. He did not do this dramatically. He simply decided the floor was where he needed to be. Vethrak asked the room something he had been turning over in his mind all night. He asked it quietly. He said he wanted to know what it meant that the species they had all privately considered the most fragile in the Cooperative had grown up on the most biologically hostile planet in the known database. Had grown up there and called it home. And then had looked at the galaxy around them and apparently not found anything in it particularly more frightening than what they had always known. Nobody answered. Lena was looking down at her cup of warm liquid. For the first time since the bite, she was not looking at something with that open, easy curiosity. She was just quiet. Vethrak looked at her and felt something he had not expected to feel. Not fear exactly. Something older than fear. Something closer to the feeling of standing at the edge of a very deep place, and only then, understanding how deep it truly was, he ended the meeting. But he stayed at his terminal long after everyone left, and he opened a new file in the Cooperative Xenobiology archive, and he began to type. The ship was quiet at night cycle, not silent. Ships were never silent. There was always the low hum of the engines and the sound of the ventilation system breathing in and out, and the occasional soft knock of metal expanding and contracting as the temperature shifted. But the crew was asleep, and the corridors were dim, and in that particular quality of quiet, Vethrak sat at the small desk in his quarters and looked at the message. He had been composing for 3 hours. He had written it and deleted it several times. Not because he did not know what he wanted to say, because he did not know if he had the right to say it. He closed the file. He would send it in the morning. He stood up and looked out the narrow viewport beside his desk. The stars were there. They were always there. Cold and white and enormous, and completely indifferent to everything that happened between them. He had looked at those stars for 40 years and never once felt small. He felt small now. He heard footsteps in the corridor. He recognized them. Humans walked differently from every other species on the ship. Not heavier or lighter. Just different. Like something that was always slightly ready to change direction. He opened his door before she knocked. Lena stood in the corridor, in her off-duty clothes, with her arms folded loosely and her expression neutral. The bandage on her arm was smaller than it had been at the meeting. The bruising was already fading. Of course it was. She asked if she could come in. He stepped back. She came in and sat on the edge of the small chair near the viewport. She looked out at the stars for a moment. Then she looked at him. She said she could tell he still had a question. She said he had been carrying it around all day, and she thought he should just ask it. He sat down. He considered how to say it. He decided that after everything, the direct way was the right way. He asked her if she had been afraid. She looked at him. not surprised. Like she had known that was the question. He said he meant on the planet. When it bit her. In that first second before she looked at her arm and decided she was fine. He said he wanted to know if in that moment she had been afraid. Lena was quiet for a little while. Outside the viewport, the stars did not move. She said, yes. She had been afraid. For a second. The way your body just responds before your mind catches up. The way your heart jumps when you step off a curb wall. She said the fear was real. She was not pretending. It hit her clean and fast and genuine. He waited. She said, but then the second passed. And she looked at the bite and she thought. She had survived things like this before. She thought about what it felt like. She tried to place it. And somewhere in that process, the fear did not disappear. She said fear did not really disappear. It just stopped being in charge. She said it moved to the back. And curiosity moved to the front. Vethrak sat with that for a long time. He told her what he had come to understand. He said it carefully because it was important and he wanted to get it right. He said that his species and most species in the cooperative had spent their entire civilizational history trying to get away from danger. Building walls, building ships, building weapons, developing medicines. The whole long effort of intelligent life for most species was the effort to put more and more distance between themselves and the things that could kill them. And they had succeeded. And the success was good. The success was civilization, but he said there was a cost. He said the further you moved from danger, the more enormous it became in your mind. The less you lived near it, the more power it had over you. Fear became the thing that made decisions. Not always loudly. Sometimes very quietly. In what missions you approved, and which ones you filed away. In which planets you catalogued as places to never return. In how you looked at a new species and decided without checking that they were the fragile ones. He stopped. He said he had looked at her for 8 months and decided she was fragile because she came from something he had not yet looked at. Because she was new and small, and the cooperative files on humans were thin. He said he had made an assumption, and the assumption was wrong. And he wanted to say that plainly. Lena looked at him for a moment. She did not deflect it or wave it off. She let it land the way it was meant to. She said she appreciated that. Then she said something that he wrote down word for word after she left because he did not want to lose it. She said growing up where she grew up, you learned very quickly that the world was not safe. You learned it personally. Something bit you or stung you, or a winter came that was harder than the last one, or you fell somewhere far from help. She said Earth did not give you the option of pretending otherwise. And so you stopped pretending. And once you stopped pretending, something changed in you. Not that you stopped being afraid. She said she wanted to be clear about that. She said she was afraid of things. She was afraid of losing people. She was afraid of wasted time. She was afraid of never understanding the things she most wanted to understand. She said she just was not afraid of being bitten anymore. She said there was a certain freedom in that. A certain kind of freedom that she had not known was unusual until she left Earth and started meeting everyone else. She stood up. She said she was going to sleep. She paused at the door and looked back. She said he should sleep too. She said he had been awake for over 30 hours, and she had checked, and there was nothing on the scan schedule that required him in the next 8 hours. And the planet was not going anywhere. She said she would like to go back down tomorrow if the captain approved it. He said he would go with her. She smiled. She left. He sat in the quiet for a while. Then he opened his file again. This time, he did not delete it. He wrote clearly and without hesitation. He wrote to the Cooperative Xenobiological Archive. He wrote that he was submitting a case study and a formal reclassification recommendation regarding the human species. He wrote that previous classifications had been based on insufficient data and incorrect assumptions. He wrote that humans were not fragile. He wrote that humans were something the cooperative database did not yet have adequate language for. He thought for a moment about how to close the file. He titled it. He called it what it was: species that should not exist. And yet insist on continuing to. He submitted it. He turned off his terminal. He looked out at the stars one more time. Somewhere in the ship, a human was sleeping soundly with a healing bite mark on her arm and a head full of plans for tomorrow and a lifetime of scars from a world that had tried to teach her to be afraid and had accidentally taught her the opposite. The stars outside the viewport were the same as always, cold and white and vast, but for the first time in 40 years of looking at them, Vethrak did not feel alone out there. He felt something much stranger and much better than that. He felt like whatever was out there in all that dark and distance and silence, the species that walked into it last were going to be just fine. He went to sleep, and somewhere below the ship the Death Garden glowed in the dark, and waited and did not know that the most dangerous thing to ever stand inside. It had thought it was interesting.